Welcome back to the LaunchFamily Podcast, where we have honest conversations about the parts of parenting that don't always get named, but quietly shape the peace inside our homes. I'm your host, Jessica Shelley, mom of seven, former educator, and co founder of LaunchFamily. Today's conversation is especially close to home for so many high capacity, high heart moms who love their families deeply, but are exhausted from caring so much. My guest today is Latika Vines, founder of Visionary Initiatives, faith centered coach, and host of a podcast that has been guiding women for 6 years towards clarity, alignment, and rest. Latika's story begins in a season many moms don't talk about openly: postpartum depression, 4 children, demanding commute, leadership responsibilities at church, and the quiet realization that doing all the things wasn't the same as being aligned with what God was actually asking of her. Out of that breaking point came a powerful framework she now calls faith centered equity, not chasing work life balance, but learning how to discern the season you're in, set boundaries without guilt, and steward your capacity with wisdom. If you've ever felt like you can handle if you've ever felt like you can handle a lot, so everyone keeps handing you more, this is the conversation for you. We're talking about recognizing overload early, learning to say no without spiraling into guilt, and creating a simple weekly reset that brings peace back into your home. Latika, I'm so grateful you're here. So let's dive right in.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that introduction. I think I need to, have you as my MC always so you can give that introduction.
It's good. I'll send it over after. No, I'm so grateful that you're here on the pod today. I want to give a little bit more context because again, like the intro is just high level of who you are. Like we go much deeper. So, I guess tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are. What's your journey been like? How did you get into the work that you're doing now?
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me today. As you mentioned, mom of four, and, I got sick my daughter was probably like 7 months, almost 8 months old, my fourth daughter, and it was a really bad, I thought, cold. But what I realized, it was a sinus infection. And when I went to my, primary care, she was like, "This is more than a sinus infection." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And, she's like, "I know you just had a baby, but you are exhibiting signs of postpartum depression." And I'm like, "How you get that off of a sinus infection?" So she gave me a questionnaire, and she said, "Yep, you are dealing with postpartum." And I'm so grateful because she's literally right there. And, this was almost 9 years ago. They had the laptops right there with them in the office. And so she wrote up a note for me to take 2 weeks off from work. She wrote a note for me to not do anything. And she told me to go seek therapy. And she also, asked if I had a mentor or someone I can lean on for guidance. And for the next 2 weeks, it was definitely a breath of fresh air because I was able to rest and not have to worry about the commute and everything. But what I learned is that I was a whole hot mess. I was a whole hot mess because I kept on saying yes. My husband called it overcommitting, not realizing that I was looking for validation. I was, trying to appease everybody, neglecting myself in that process. And maybe 6 months later, I was able to really understand that everything doesn't need to be balanced. Work and life including family, home, ministry, recreational things, it does not all have to be balanced because balance means you're giving each category of your life the same amount of time. But that's not how life goes. And in certain seasons, you're going to have to pay more attention to your home. And other seasons, you're going to have to pay attention more to your marriage. And other seasons, you're going to have to pay attention to, your work more. And so has to be an equality. And in Luke, it talks about that there is always time, but it's time in a season that we have to pay attention to, that God has given us seasons that align with his will, not our will. And so once I realized all of that, I was really able to identify faith-centered equity. And even though, I was a wife of a deacon and I'm leading all these ministries and doing all the things, I did not really have God in the center of everything that I was doing. And so faith centered equity is really ensuring that God is in the center of everything you're doing. And in that particular season, He is leading you, guiding you into what you're supposed to give priority to. And so that is what I teach working moms through coaching and also in the podcast.
Incredible. I feel like this is a very timely conversation for listeners listening in. We had just briefly chatted and connected right before we started this podcast today. I'm actually gearing up to have baby number 7. But by the time that this actually airs, baby number 7 will be here. And so it is another, like, when you talk about seasons, I'm thinking about like welcoming a new baby, or maybe your child is starting school. What are some of those other seasons that we might encounter as we're raising a family, or we're in a marriage, or whatever that could look like? Can you just kind of list off some of those seasons that listeners might be in right now?
Absolutely. A season of feeling alone when you're in a room full of people. Um, a season of, and this is a season I had to get out of recently, a season of feeling that you need to be validated because past trauma has called you abandoned and rejected. A season of, you think or people think on the outside, you and your husband have this strong, wonderful, fun relationship, but on the inside, in the four walls of your home, the both of you are struggling with communication. A season of, you know, you want the promotion and you deserve the promotion, and paper says that you are the best fit for the promotion, but you get skipped over. Those are the seasons, that some of us are in currently, and some of them we're managing multiple seasons at the same time, right? And so, it's there's so many things that we go through from time to time, but it's so important for us to make sure that we are alert to the alignment where we're supposed to be in that season.
Love that you talk about that too, of like you can be in multiple different seasons, right? Like you might be going through something with your children, or in your marriage, or in your job, or maybe it's just one season that you're going through, like with your personal identity, right? Or your faith could also be
Right.
another one. So I love that you also bring that in, because it's like I can't think of a time where I was only going through one season. Maybe sometimes life just is that way, right?
Right.
So you talked a little bit about balance and how, typically we give the mindset of things being like, okay, equal. So I need to give equal time to my spouse, equal time to my kids, equal time to my job. That's kind of what we think of when we think of balance, is like the scales. But I think that there's this word that came up when we initially connected, which was boundaries. So maybe what was that first boundary that you set that kind of helped shift everything or change everything for you, that goes from like balance to seeking boundaries?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I go through with my clients is like a alignment check, a will check. And this is literally, what are you doing with your time and energy and resources? And what I found out, and as I was doing it, I didn't really think about me doing it, but I was leading 6 ministries at church on top of being a mom, of 4, working full time, a husband, a daughter, like all the things. And when I did that will check, I was like, "Oh my goodness, I am leading, not in, I am leading 6 ministries." And the biggest ministry was the youth ministry. And at the time, I was studying to be a deaconess at the church. And I was just like, "Oh, this is where my time is going." And after, of course, prayer, it was, "All right, I have to release this. God, show me how to release." these ministries because in this season that you've called me to, I have to focus on my children because, at the time, my daughter wasn't even one yet, you know? So I can't focus on building these ministries. I have to focus on my family because God, you've called me to steward my family first. And so I literally have to put in a resignation to those ministries and to my deaconess training. And it taught me that in order for me to move forward, as far as going into another ministry or, whatsoever in church, I had to create boundaries. And what I backed them up was, how am I stewarding my time? A lot of times when we're in church or when with, folks in ministry, it's, we got to put God first. We got to put God first. And people equate putting God first, church. But that's not what that means. Putting God first is, how are you serving God? How is your relationship with God? Are you stewarding your time, with God? Is he the first thing that comes to your mind when you wake up? Is he the first, thing that comes to your mind when you go through trials and tribulations, or do you put him last? That is putting God first. Then, your husband, your family, church is below. And so I had to realize that framework and understanding that nothing comes before God. And then after God, it's my husband. And then after God, it's my family. And then church is next. And that was hard for me to understand at first. But once I really got, of course, God's direction and his blessing to do that, I understood that everything in life has to be that way. That, we want to put work first. We want to put relationships, first, but it's God is order. And so we have to put him first above everything. And so creating these boundaries was really understanding that God is not asking too much from you. God is not manipulating you. God is not, saying, well, you got to do this and you got to do this and you got to do this. God is simply saying, hey, the first commandment is to love me. Love me with your whole heart, with your whole mind, with your whole soul. That's all you have. That's the first commandment. And then the second is to have love among yourselves. God has told you exactly how you're supposed to be, And so I really had to understand that, boundaries really is, what is it that, what is that order? And then understanding that when it comes to people, you don't have to, and I just, God really just gave this to me. You don't have to set boundaries with people, places, or things if they can respect your order. If people,
Mm.
places, and things cannot respect your order of life, God, husband, family, then they don't need to be in your life. They don't need to be in your immediate circle. And so for me, that was so important and it's so powerful for me to understand that there's order, there's a structure. And once I got that structure down, now I'm able to understand, okay, there has to be some boundaries here.
It's incredibly powerful. And I love that you described the order too, right? So for people that maybe aren't believers, then they can also discern maybe, what that order looks like to them. Um, I want to come back to this seasons too, because how, like, as a person of faith, right? Our order is typically the same because it's written in the Bible of like how we're supposed to order our lives and our priorities. So for those different seasons, there's different, I would say different pressures, and you talk about people, places, things, and at different times and in different seasons, there might be a pull to kind of pull from that order a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about how the seasons and those boundaries maybe coincide? And how do you help moms identify maybe what God is calling them in that season versus what people are asking of them?
That is such a good question, Jessica. That is such a good question. Because you're right. You're going to have those boundaries in all of your seasons. Even if there are multiple ones happening at the same time, you have to have boundaries. And people call boundaries different names. They have different terminologies, different definitions. But really, like you said, what is that structure? What is the order of your life? And that goes back to values. When I'm coaching moms, when I'm hosting training events, it is number one, what do you value the most? So when you are in a season of, being in a room that's full of people, but feel like you're alone or you feel very small, what do you value? What do you value? Because what you value will now help you to set those boundaries in that particular season. Because sometimes, as you mentioned, it's the people, places, and things that may cause us to feel small or alone when we're in a room full of people. And those people, places, and things could be past trauma. It could be, things that we've read. It could be society. It could be culture. It could be a lot of things that cause us to do certain things, to feel certain ways. Um, and so it's important for us to understand that when we are in a season of feeling alone, when we're around a whole bunch of people, when we're in this big family, it's understanding, what do we value? Do we value our family? Do we value the people that we're with? Do we value the place that we're in? If we don't value that, then now we have to step out and really do an alignment check and say, okay, is this where God wants me to be? Because a lot of times we may feel isolated in a season, but God has never placed us in that season.
Mm.
God never placed us in this season. He never told us to go in this direction. We went in this direction because it felt good, or because we're following other people, or, because, hey, the culture is we're doing this, or tradition is we're doing this. But God never called us to go that way. And we know that God doesn't give us a spirit of fear. And we know that God, said that he will never forsake us or leave us plenty of times in the Bible. So if we feel this way, there's something not right with what we value. And so it all starts with the value. What do I value in this season? Do I value love? Like, prime example, my husband and I, um, maybe a couple weeks ago, we had to sit down and reevaluate what we valued, because before the pandemic, we valued this. But now here we are, we're many years post the pandemic, and we're like, what do we value in relationships? What do we value in a church home? What do we value at work? What do we value when it comes to making sure that we can raise our children to be God-fearing human beings? Our values change from 6 years ago. And so we have to do these alignment checks to see what we value, because every season is different, and every season causes us to do a check on our alignment. I mean, our values, because our values, they mature and they develop and they grow. And so it's only important for us to do that value check when we're in seasons that we're unsure of, or the uncertainty is causing us to look at God and say, God, what are you doing? What's happening here? And so, yeah, that value, let me tell you, that value check will have you looking at yourself and other people like, what am I doing?
Oh my gosh. Talk about like a hyper focused lens or magnifying glass, right? Like, where has my time, where has my effort been going? Is that actually aligned to
Yes.
where it should be going? Um, I think that the value check is a great like first step to just self-evaluate. Am I
Yes.
actually operating in alignment with what I value? I think like some examples that come to mind too, you know, just based on different seasons is that we have this like pressure, like when you talk about society and culture and tradition, it's like, okay, you have a new baby and everyone has something to say about how you raise your child, right? Or, wow, you're such an ambitious mom because you're going back to work. You're after your 6 weeks of, maternity leave. Or like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you'd be going back to work. Like, shouldn't you be at home with your baby? And it's like, all of those things are coming from projecting whatever they think that they value, right, onto you. But I love that you talk about centering on what do you value? What do you and your partner value? What does God tell you to value in this season? Because we don't have to be like full high octane career and full high octane family. Like as you mentioned, like that's how we burn out and then we can't show up for anything. you know? So what is I guess like any like common signs or things like trends that you've noticed from the clients that you work with for like moms that are maybe trying to live out someone else's vision instead of their own? Like what are some of those ways that you could kind of maybe see or recognize that misalignment?
Ooh, Lord Jesus, let me tell you. Let me tell you. And I think, and I can only speak from my personal experience and the moms that I've worked with over the last 8 years, is that many of us fall into a pit, if you will, of sickness, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual illness, because we are following somebody else.
Mm.
And I say that because, when we look at, growing up, we didn't have social media. I remember when the World Wide Web first came out, and so like we didn't have the exposure of culture and society like we do today. So as a mom, when we're, on our phone and we're scrolling on Instagram, we're, going on Facebook, we're going on TikTok and people are doing this, or they're having a baby and they're bouncing back and they're getting back into their size 2 jeans. And you're like, how in the world did that happen? So let me starve myself while I'm breastfeeding my daughter so that I can get back into my size 2 jeans. No, that's not how that works. We are looking at everything and everybody else. And I honestly have to tell myself First Thessalonians 4:11 every single day. And I have an actual mug that tells me to make it my aim to live quietly and to mind my business. Because what happens is when we are minding other people's business, we are trying to mimic what they have, but we don't know what heaven or hell they went through to get to where they are today. We don't know the pressures that they went through to get to where they are today. That mom who just had a baby and got into a size 2, we don't know her genes. We don't know her eating habits. We don't know what she's allergic to. We don't know if that baby was a preemie. There's so many things that we don't see and we don't know, but because we look at this glass picture, we're like, "Oh my God, I have to live like that. I have to have my family like this." No, we don't. And we also have to understand that it's easy for us to get jealous of other people. We get jealous of other people because we are we may not have what they have, what that other mom has. We may not have, or our husband may not have what that other husband has, right? Um, our kids may not be excelling as much as another mom down the street in our neighborhoods kids are. We have to mind our business. We have to mind our business. And that's something that we literally have to learn to do, because when we're minding other people's business, that's when all of the temptations, come in, because I got to do this, like right now I can think of like 50 million, and I'm not even lying, 50 million influencers on YouTube and on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram who are trying to tell us how to clean our houses, right? Telling us how to clean our house and how we need to do this and our baseboards need to do this. And you need to, use this technique to make sure that your baseboards are this clean. And don't forget to, get the cobwebs that are in the corner of. Listen, you don't understand. I work full time. I do not, I can't afford to have someone come in here and clean my house, on a regular basis. It's six of us in this house. Everybody has a chore. I had to learn not everybody's going to clean the way that I clean, but guess what? It's clean and my house is clean. May not be Martha Stewart clean, but it's clean, right? We have to mind our business because when we start looking at other people's businesses, we get ourselves consumed thinking that we have to do the same thing. We have to mind our business. And I lie to you not. I learned that scripture, 1 Thessalonians 4:11, when I was very small. But when I became a mom for like the umpteenth time, that scripture became so clear to me because it is so true. When we don't mind our business and we're in other people's business, that's when we have to do the things, or we feel like we're isolated, or we feel like we have to do this because other people are doing it. We just have to mind our business. And if that means we have to stay off of social media, if that means we have to stop watching TV, if that means social media includes YouTube, we have to stay off of all of that. I have taught my moms, and I do it myself. I have a timer on my phone every day for social media. And so if I'm on social media, all platforms, YouTube, Twitter, all of them, for more than an hour, it cuts all of them off. It cuts all of them off. I have to mind my business. And that is something that I teach our working moms because that right there, minding other people's business, will cause you to go crazy. And we do not need to be sick. We don't. We do not need to be sick because we have a whole family. We have a whole husband. We have whole jobs that we have to tend to. We do not have the time or the energy to mind other people's business. And it's not being a good steward. And we're not following order and structure in our lives when we are minding other people's business. So I know that was a long answer, but at the end of the day, we got to mind our business.
Love that. And I second the social media timer thing on my phone. I have that set up too. And my kids actually, they'll get frustrated because we'll like be watching something together and then it'll all shut down. And I'm like, oh, sorry, time's up. And it's like, okay, because we homeschool our kids. So they're around all the time. And then I also have my phone to shut down at 9 p.m. every night. It's like, okay, so the only thing I can access is my clock and alarms and my like maybe my notes app in case I need to like put something in there before I go to bed. So setting those boundaries too with your time, also in alignment to, your values, right? So I think one of the things that jumped out as you were sharing that story about social media, like I like the cleaning part. Oh my gosh, we have a lot of like my oldest child is 9. Okay, y'all. Like our house is always in disarray. There's different projects going on. We also homeschool. We've got 2 dogs, the whole thing. And so when you talk about cleaning, I'm like, yep, that's where I've been. But then again, and like the question comes up like immediately after that of like, would I rather spend 45 minutes cleaning my baseboards or 45 minutes with my kids, right? Like, okay, maybe we could clean the baseboards together in like a 15-minute race or something, but it's not going to be clean baseboards throughout the whole house, okay? Like we got to work with what we have. And so I love that kind of perspective too of when it comes down to the values and the alignment of whatever season you're in. Like, okay, sure, I'll have clean baseboards when they're all gone. Like, and they're grown and they have their own families. Sure, I will have clean baseboards, totally fine. But the season of life that I'm in, there's so many other things I want to prioritize over the clean baseboards because they're just gonna get, muddied up again with the dogs and the kids anyway. So I love that you put that into perspective because like social media trap is like huge, right? Like especially because the whole like intentionality of social media is that these creators are known for a specific thing. And so then if you're following them, it's like all you're seeing is cleaning. Oh, all you're seeing is healthy cooking. Oh, all you're seeing is homeschooling. All you're seeing is this. All you're seeing is this.
Yes.
And it's like you do realize that that's their only focus, right?
Right.
It's not meant for us to do all of it all the time. So I am so grateful that you brought in that example because I think we all live in that state of like, oh, I could be doing better or I should be doing better. But it's really like, well, we're in
Yeah.
different seasons as well. We have different priorities or values, or what you see is
Yes.
valued as only one thing on social media versus what we're actually living out. Um, Okay.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. This is like I'm so excited by this episode because it just hits so many of those points that we really like struggle with as
Yes.
moms. So any guidance, I guess, on how moms can handle that internal guilt that comes after setting a boundary. So like, hey, I'm gonna realize my house is not gonna be Instagram perfect, like Martha Stewart's not coming over. Like whatever that boundary is, how can we maybe avoid some of that internal guilt of like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna have that, picture perfect place or the healthy meals 24/7 available to my family. My kids are still gonna be fed. It's just gonna be maybe chicken nuggets and fries one day or something, you know? So how can moms kind of combat that?
Absolutely. Minding our business is the number one thing.
I think that's the title of the episode. Mind your business.
But, honestly, it goes back to our values, or I should say, in addition to our values, having accountability to live up to our values. And
Mm,
so, having your husband hold you accountable, maybe a trusted, close friend that you can be vulnerable with that can hold you accountable to your values is so important. Because if you realize that, yes, I love a clean home, but my home is not going to be Martha Stewart ready, but it's going to be clean according to my values. That's it. And that's all. And you have to be okay with that. You
mhm,
have to be okay with that. And one thing that we have to realize as women is that there are a lot of women in our lives who remind us of who we were or remind us or tell us who we should be. And we have to understand that many times those are not the people that we need to have in our inner circle. There's not. Because if you're going to have people around you who are going to constantly remind you what they think you should be doing with your time, those are not the people that you need to have in your inner circle. You need to have people in your inner circle who are going to hold you accountable, who are going to uplift you, who are going to encourage you, not add into the guilt. Right. And so, ensuring that that inner circle is that strong, folks. And what I equate that to is look at Jesus' example. Jesus had three buckets of people, three different categories. The first category was, the 70 plus disciples and apostles who did ministry with him. Then the second category were his 12 disciples. And even in that second category, he had Judas Iscariot that betrayed him. Right? I mean, he did. He served and they served with him, but they all weren't for him, in that category. Shoot, Thomas even doubted him. You right? But Jesus had a third category, and that was Peter, James, and John. And they saw Jesus cry. They saw Jesus intimately go into prayer. They saw Jesus fast. They got to do life with Jesus. You have to figure out who your Peter, James, and John are, who are going to hold you accountable and you're going to be able to do life with you, not doubt you, not tell you what you should be doing, not tell you what they saw on Instagram that now you need to be doing, not telling you what the latest trend is. They need to be there to say, hey, you want me to help you with these baseboards? I'm going to get down on my knees and I'm going to help you with these baseboards. Those are the type of people that you need in your corner, in your inner circle, that are going to remind you God made you strong. He says that he will give you his strength when you are weak. Those are the people that you need in your corner to remind you who you are. So, making sure that you have people in your corner who are going to be there for you and hold you accountable, understanding that you are not going to be, as far as cleaning is concerned, you're not going to be Martha Stewart. Guess what? Martha Stewart doesn't have any kids roaming around in her house. Martha Stewart, she probably has one dog, and that's a cute little short dog that does not shed hair, and her house is perfect. Martha Stewart has how much money? Right? She has
Right.
how much more influence? We are not equal. We are not equal. And the same goes to the people that we see or on social media, the people that we see in our neighborhoods or, anywhere else. We are not equal to anybody, and so we have to remember that even though we all were made in God's image, He created us differently. And so the things that you value and the things that you would like to do in your family, in your life, somebody else is thinking the complete opposite and doing the complete opposite. The things that you and your husband value are not going to be the same of another couple's values. You may value your children to, go to school, go to Harvard. Go to Harvard and excel as, this amazing lawyer. Well, somebody else, their kids, they just want them to go to college, period, or pick up a trade. And that's perfectly fine. You know, it's what you value, and then what values are you passing on to your children? The Bible tells us that we are supposed to leave a legacy to our children. So in that legacy, what are you leading your children as far as values are concerned? Are they going to value a clean home over having dinner with the family at the table every night? Are they going to value, the husband going to value working like a Hebrew slave rather than being home with their children and being at the soccer games, every Thursday evening? Like, not everyone is going to have the same values. And so you have to identify, you and your husband, what are the values we're going to set for our family? And then that value is going to be the legacy we're passing down for generations and generations. They're going to value this, you know, and understand that not everyone is going to agree with you. Not everyone is going to like what your values are. But again, what category are those people in? Because if those people are in a category that are in your Peter, James, and John, maybe you need to reevaluate who's in that category because you don't need people nitpicking and telling you what you need to be doing if they're supposed to be holding you accountable, and showing up for you and encouraging you. You don't need people in that intimate space guilt tripping you. You need people to encourage you, to love you, right? And so it's so important for you to know who's who, what category do they need to be in, and understand that you got to mind your business, but it all goes back to those values.
I love this trajectory that you've taken us on today. It's like, okay, we need to start with ourselves and our reflection and make sure that we're in alignment, right? And get our priorities in order, basically. And then it's what is all of the things around that need to shift in order to make sure that that is actually how we're living. As we wrap up today, my mind is already like swirling with a whole bunch of other questions, but I know that we're almost out of time. So I'm like, okay, what is one final thought, one tip, one step for a mom that's listening in today that might be feeling overwhelmed? Like, what is one lasting, notion that you want to leave with her as she's either going to be reflecting or taking action and or anything that's going on with her life?
Absolutely. I would really encourage you um, to sit down and analyze what in the world are you doing with your time, energy, and resources. And I have a tool called the Face Center Equity Tracker where it really allows you to sit down and see where you're stewarding your time. Are you spending time with God? Um, are you spending time with your husband? Are you spending time with your children? What are you doing when it comes to, work? Are you excelling at work, but not feeling like you're excelling at home? Like, what does that look like? But really allowing you to see where you're stewarding your time and your energy and resources. Because if you see that there is um, not equality, or you're really not sure how to be able to split your time between X, Y, and Z, A, B, C. Doing some type of alignment check will allow you to see exactly where you're stewarding your time, and to understand that the things you valued from 2 years ago, a year ago, are going to be completely different to today. And so, really, just sitting down and doing that check, and understanding where, or identifying where you're spending your time, your energy, your resources, to see exactly how to move forward, how to, see what's more valuable to you, to see what season you're in, to see what season God has called you to be in, because sometimes the seasons we're in are not the seasons that God has called us to. So just really doing that check could help you to see exactly how to move forward.
Well, Latika, thank you so much for naming what so many moms feel, but we rarely say out loud, which is that doing everything isn't the same as being aligned. And
Yes.
that peace doesn't come from just pushing harder, doing the extra thing, showing up in this new way. To our listeners, if you're listening and you're carrying too much, take one small step this week. So choose your top three priorities, align on your values, set one boundary, and ask God for clarity in this season. We'll be sure to link all of Latika's resources and ways to connect with her directly in the show notes. And we'll see you next time on the Launch Family Podcast.